Sure.
That should be our intro. Just like,
Yeah.
give me that, vogue, vogue,
Ew,
give me that,
ew.
vogue, vogue, give me that, vogue, vogue, give me that, vogue, vogue.
Ew.
uh, to be fair, though, it's kind of hard to do like a drop on a podcast. We
It
do
is
put out the
true. It is true.
video for this as well, so the audience will just have to imagine that there's like
Exactly.
voguing
But this is how you do it when
happening.
you pretend you do it. And just rule 101 of voguing. It's not called a death drop. It's called a
A jib,
dip.
a dip.
DIP. Yeah.
Yes, I don't know. I heard jib like it's some
A
kind of
jib. No, I think it was
like a boating term or something. Isn't a jib something in boats?
I have no idea.
A dip. Okay, cool. Insider knowledge. That's good to know,
Yeah,
actually.
exactly. Yeah.
All right, sweet. Let me introduce you, and then like we'll just jump in if that's okay.
Cool.
All right, sweet as. Um, Hello, lovely dance people, and welcome to David's Dance Podcast. I'm your host, David Evans. We have an amazing dance artist and movement consultant here with us on the podcast. She's representing Mexico and London, and she is running her own dance school based in London, Ballet North, specializing in early years dance education. She is also by night an incredible glittery voguer, and we're so happy to have her here on the podcast with her, expansive and multi-talented career. It was so great reading more about her. I know Mariana already, but I feel like in the my prep research, I was like, oh my gosh, and she did this and this, and realizing how eclectic her career was. So I'm really excited to have her here on the podcast today. Mariana Lorenzano, we're so happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. What an amazing introduction. Thanks.
No, it's dope to finally catch up. Like I feel like we probably haven't seen each other since like the the 11 days, which is like crazy how like fast that went by. Hey.
I know. We did so many things after, and then a pandemic hits, and like,
Yeah. It's
so
hard, right?
yeah.
Because it's like everyone's CVs is just like the same. It's just like this, and then just like hit 2020, and then suddenly it's like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We had to get creative in some other ways.
We sure did. And you've been, I mean, how's it been for you? You run your own dance school, Ballet North. How's it been for you adapting to the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard at the beginning. We thought, like everyone else, like, oh, this is after half term, we'll be back in the studio, so let's
Yeah.
just not do anything. And then when that didn't happen, we were like, right, we need to solve this.
Mm.
And we started running some classes online. Very different format, like especially because the children were not going to school, right? So we started having classes at 11 a.m. and at 2 p.m. and that was quite nice also for, us the teachers. We were not like working to like the evenings, and that was very
Yeah.
lovely. And some people did engage, especially obviously it was a learning curve for children over 4. I would say they were very, very into it. I think they were just happy to see their friends, even on the screen, their dance
Yeah.
friends. And, there was an adaptation process about how to teach, how to give corrections, how to keep people engaged, how to keep it creative, how to give individual time to each participant. So it's not just, someone facilitating and talking to a screen, but actually like asking questions and like making things in groups, and like how can we make things together. We did with the whole school a dance that each person like filmed, and then we did like this editing, and it was very
Wow.
lovely. That was done by Jen, shout out. And that was, yeah, it was very, very interesting. And then time passed, and that seemed that was the normal way of teaching and the way of being. And then earlier this year, I think we were all a little bit fed up with it. A
Yeah,
little
for
bit
sure.
tired, just waiting for the winter to end and for things to open. So that became a little bit tougher, and we had to adapt again to school schedules, for example. So we were
Right.
again teaching in the evenings. And now we are back in the studio, which is amazing. And the kids are just so happy. And I still ask them things, and instead of replying with words, they still give me thumbs up because, that's what you do on Zoom because you're muted. So I'm like, right, did you get that? And everybody's like, thumbs up. I'm like, okay, you can speak now.
Yeah. They're walking off and they're tapping you and they're like, what are you doing? And they're like, I'm liking this post. And you're like, all right.
I heart emoji.
Yeah, that's so crazy how, we definitely get like socialized into like all of that. Are there things that like, because we've gone from like one extreme to another, but are there like learnings, or even in terms of like the business model, are there like things that you will take forward? Like, will you still keep some Zoom classes, or will you, before we jumped on the podcast, we were talking about how like it changed the way that you like offer corrections even.
Yeah. So we're still offering 1 day of online classes because we know some of the children are actually shielding. They were not just in lockdown. So
right.
We don't want to, we want to cater to everyone and like trying to be inclusive in every way that, includes also the people that still can't join us in the studio. So those classes are small, but also it works for some people that move to other countries and still want to continue with us, or just other parts of this country, So yeah, we do that. And yeah, in terms of the corrections, I think it has been really, really useful, and it has definitely been a journey to learn how to give corrections without being tactile.
Right.
But I think that actually is very, very positive, because when you don't give like a tactile correction, the dancers need to find it in their own body by their own means. And then once they found it, it's like, it's there, whereas when you do tactile corrections, you go there and then it goes back to the original form, and then you go there again and it goes back until the muscles understand it. But because there is a process of like reflecting about what you're saying and to put it into the body.
And almost like kind of self-discovery in some ways.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. So that has definitely been useful. And in places, for example, I also teach quite a bit in schools where they are obviously not used to tactile corrections. If they come to the dance studio and it's ballet, they know that, I'll be grabbing their feet. But like in schools, they're not really used to that. So I think, the children are a bit like, oh, this teacher is way too close. And of course, that is not, you don't want to make any student feel like, oh, this teacher got a bit too close.
Yeah.
So I still do that in schools, for example. I still keep the corrections just verbal, I would say.
Yeah, especially because like a lot of those safeguarding things are so stringent these days, and sometimes I feel like to some degree that gets like in the way, because I think actually I think it's a little bit of a culture that is to some degree unhelpful, and that it's like all in that the issues with like kind of a no touch culture is that it teaches kids that all touch is bad, and it's like, hey, that's not the case. Actually, it's important to be able to distinguish between different kinds of touch, and there's good touch and there's bad touch, and there's touch that's for instruction, and and for all these different things. And so it's so I think I worry sometimes about sometimes where I think some places are so strict on things, and it's like, hey, actually this is something like we need it as humans, and actually that nuance is actually really important. So it's finding a way to be safe, but without kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak.
Yeah. I think the same. I think also touch is very important to like human relations, right? And like how to live in society, and what you were saying, and just echo that about how some touch is good and some touch is bad. And then it's also important, obviously, like, well, I'm Mexican, and touch works very differently there. I think there's also like a cultural barrier, but like I do remember growing up and just like rushing to like hug my teachers, and I just love them so much. And I think here obviously people are a little bit colder than in Latinx countries. And there's definitely that like there is a proper like separation. And I think affection works in many ways with many different people in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for the children to like see that, you know, hugging your teacher might be fine.
Yeah.
Like it's good as well. With the little ones, I teach a lot in nurseries, and they are very much like, you need to be like, okay, we need to like stop hugging the teacher. This is not, you know, I'm not your auntie, I'm not your nanny, I'm your teacher. Like, please step away.
Yeah.
Which is also important that they know both things, you know. And if
Yeah.
someone is saying like, please don't hug me, then you don't hug them.
Yeah.
You know. Also with like their friends, it's like, okay, so and so does not want to be hugged. Can you tell that? You know.
Yeah.
But then I guess there becomes a little bit more of like taboo kind of barrier when children get a little bit older. And like, I get it. I absolutely get it. And I obviously respect it. But I think with like teaching dance, sometimes it's a little bit hard because, because touch is just part of how you teach and also how you communicate with dance, right? It's all about the body. It's all about like the feeling, even if it's like feeling the air, if it's feeling, you know, your clothes when you're moving. And it's just very important to understand movement. So it becomes tricky.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like what you're saying also in terms of engaging with touch, but engaging in a way that's about having conversation, about saying like, hey, no, I'm your teacher. Like actually like being able to talk about touch where it's not about like, no, not at all, but it's about like, you know, yeah, like that everyone has the right to say no. And like, yeah, just understanding also just like what's kind of culturally and what's kind of context appropriate as well, and then what's also like personally appropriate. So but yeah, I always feel that this is like a great way to engage with it. It's like to lean into it, have more conversations about it, rather than sometimes just kind of like, oh, let's just not do this because we don't want to get sued, which is like,
right,
you know, and then it's like, well, okay, but you know, is that really helpful? Is that really like educating, you know, kids for the future?
And I think it also depends obviously on the approach as a teacher, right? I used to do, and this is something that I learned at Laban, a lot of like handshaking, kind of like dances and choreographies. And at least like, if you know, if you're comfortable with a high five, then the next step is to like hold hands, and then like you can grab a forearm, and that way you can start like getting people like mixing together. And it's such like a safe way because it's equal, right? So it's always consensual, a high five or like a handshake. And it also like in certain contexts, you know, in like community dance projects mainly, in some places and for some people, touch has always been a negative thing. And it's just like very beautiful to be able to make participants discover that touch can be safe. It can mean something. It can be very meaningless as well, right? It doesn't need to be that deep. Oh, I'm sharing all this love. It's like, no, we're just gonna high five around, and you know, and you like give me your wage and those kind of things.
Like really like just mechanical and like part of the dance and part of the mechanics of the dance.
Yeah, and then you can put your own reflection on it, right?
Yeah, I like that. Is there have you ever thought about or I don't know, like do you teach Vogue as well? Is that something that you teach or share? Or is do you feel like that exists like in its like own separate world for you?
No. I mean, it's different things. I would definitely not teach Vogue in my dance school because I believe Vogue, you need to be a little bit older and, you know, a little bit queerer because it's definitely a queer dance. And it definitely comes from the queer Black and Latinx community. So I would be very mindful of where I'm teaching it. But also, like here in London, we have people that have been voguing for years. I just feel it wouldn't be my place to teach it. I think my place in the voguing community is more like creating that community and bringing people in and trying to have like people coming together and, you know, direct them into like with the people that are actually teaching that have, you know, knowledge of like, you know, 15 plus years of having been involved in the community.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's been here for quite a bit. And it started very small, just like a few queer Black people dancing in the clubs, and everybody being like, "What is this crazy thing? What are you doing?" And then like developing into little like nights where we used to so we used to have these vogue nights in the basement of a chicken shop in Dalston. That was iconic. Completely iconic. They were great.
Yeah, some chicken dips.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the smell of fried chicken just made everything better. It was fantastic. Like walls literally like dripping sweat. It was great.
Amazing.
So yeah, it started very small, and now, it's also being like popularized everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more mainstream, and, if people want to like get into voguing, there's, the ballroom community in general, like ballroom is so much more than voguing. That is just one of the performance categories. But, there's also fashion. There's also runway, how to walk. There's also things about presentation and gender presentation and like what they call realness, which realness means how much you pass as a straight person or as a cis person. If you say chicken shop realness, that's not a thing. That word has been completely like decontextualized from its original place. But oh well.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes people say it and I'm like, no, that's no. But you know what? Whatever.
And for yourself, like, I know it's taken off in a huge way in the last few years, but how did you get into the scene and into voguing?
It was beautiful. I was actually going to a dance shop to buy ballet shoes. And this amazing, beautiful woman, Diva, she's the manager of the shop. And she was just like so interesting, and she was so flowy when she talked and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, "Oh, you're a dancer as well, right?" And she was like, "Yeah, I'm a voguer." And I'm like, "Oh my God, what's that?" She was like, "Well, I'm actually teaching my first class tomorrow." And I was like, "Cool, I'm there." And I just went to that class, and then I went to Benjamin Milan's New Way class, and I was just like, "Yeah, this is where I belong." Like all these queer people just moving around and being fabulous, like absolutely. And it's like created for like, people like me, for like Latinx people. I'm like, great.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was just sucked in. Like once I was there, I was like, wow, there's no turning back.
That's the best kind of like, I don't know, dance stuff, when it's like, why do you do that? And you're just like, well, why wouldn't you be here? Like, why wouldn't, like, I remember somebody asking me about that with like salsa at university, when like I got there and I was like, couldn't wait to like join and start doing classes and like go out dancing, do all this. And people are like, so why did you like, get into that? And I'm just like, why wouldn't you? Like I was like, well, I was just like, why isn't everybody here? Like,
right,
exactly. It would just seem so obvious to me, but like, I guess not to everyone. But like when I went, it was just like, this is so much fun. Like,
yeah, and it's also like amazing when you find a place, like the movement agrees with like your personality and with your way of moving, but also the people around you and part of that community agree with like your views of the world, or like what it means to move. And it's just like a perfect like mix of the people and how the movement kind of goes through your body,
finding your tribe, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Like and that was what it was very hard during the pandemic, and we were talking about this earlier, how obviously we couldn't dance in the studio, and I think that really took a toll on my dancing. Like I stopped dancing for the most part of the pandemic. Like I did a lot of Gaga because I was like comfortable doing it like at home. But I started realizing more and more. I was just like, oh, I think I'm just a bit uninspired. I don't really feel like dancing. And then just taking each dance class without the people, without being in the studio, it was I was suffering through it instead of enjoying it.
Yeah.
So like, you know, I think I'm just gonna have a break and not like, kill myself for not being like training every day or, engaging in like in dancing. I started like a lockdown project as we all did, but it was very much about like creativity and the movement that was already in my body and not so much about training.
Yeah. There's something really interesting about like how much you train by yourself. Like I think for everyone there's like a kind of perfect ratio of like solo training and like group training, and some of that is determined by like how you learn. I think we probably put like an overemphasis in like classical styles on classes, and like definitely me coming from like a street and a breakdance thing, like I've now arrived at like a hybrid where like I really like about input once a week, where it's like take one class in that style once a week, and there's almost always so much material there that you could easily unpack it and just work on that material by yourself for another like 2 to 3 sessions throughout the week. um uh and so I find that balance right, and I find motivationally as well like I do my best dance training when I'm able to do that hybrid, when I'm able to dance with people, but then also have some time where I can like be dancing just by myself. And I find that's when I feel most alive and most motivated in my dancing, is when I have that mix. And because actually, if I just do the solo stuff, eventually I'm just like, well, I'm not, sharing this dance with anyone, and it quickly stops being fun and whatever. But if I have that community element there, then for some reason, I don't know why, then even when I dance solo, just train by myself, it's more fun because I am like, well, I'm eventually going to share this with someone. And
Right.
so I find that community element like that you're talking about, I realized, and it was part of our motivations for like for moving, was that I was like, I do need to be plugged into a community, and it doesn't even need to be a professional dance community. It just needs to be like just other people that love dancing, and that by itself I just find is just like, it's just gas in the tank, it's fuel in the fire for like getting me motivated to move.
Yeah, totally. And that solo training that you do, after being like in a community kind of training, it's so good because then you come back, it's like what's the opposite of a vicious cycle? Well, the opposite of a vicious cycle. So like
positive cycle.
so yeah.
It's like it's a snowball effect. Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. Yeah, like you train on your own, you like get some new steps, or you like, really milk a step and like find new ways of doing it, or different textures or whatever. And then you go to your community, you like showcase that, you share it, and then you also get new steps that then you can work on, and so on and so on. Whereas if you only go to classes, which is very much, like I come from a classical training, and obviously ballet is, something that you need to do 6 times a week, maybe twice a day, like very, very strict. And then it took me such a long time to understand that ballet could be creative as well, because I was just being drilled into, as we were all, that is my cat crying, I'm so sorry. I was just being drilled into, just getting technique. And then I discovered much later, but like well into my, late 20s, when I started doing more contemporary things, that I was like, oh, these can be creative as well. And if I hadn't spent all the time just training technique, maybe I would have found like different ways of moving, even within such like a, encapsulated,
well-defined style.
Exactly, as ballet. So that, and now that I do more freestyle things, I think it's the opposite for me. It's like now I have to really train myself to not repeat the same drills. For example, when I'm voguing, because, my body's like, right, let's like look at this drill. And like, I'll do like, 8 movements or 8 poses, and then I'll work with them and I'll milk them and I'll find different ways of doing it, whatever. And then when I'm freestyling, I always do those 8 in the same order, you know? So like
Right.
freestyling is like unlearning technique,
Yeah.
you know? So
Yeah.
it's very interesting
Well,
too.
is the thing is, well, the great thing about freestyling is that it's just cognitively like very different to like I think it teaches you to think about dance really differently than doing choreography or learning dance in like a really structured way, because I think you tend to learn because yeah, when you learn or are integrating movement to freestyle or for improvisation, there's an element of where it's a bit more like chess. It's like non-linear, where you're thinking, you're like, this is the movement. Now, where could this go? It could go this way. It could go this way. You know, it could go this way. So I feel like you're always thinking about the transitions when I'm like improving or freestyling, and really I see like each move as almost like the power of that move is how many transitions I have into it and out of it. And a movement that might be like incredible, but I don't have a lot of transitions into and out of it, is actually quite limited. There's only so many ways I can improvise with that movement. Whereas like part of the power of like really good improvers and freestylers is that they understand so many different ways to transition into and out of a movement, that it gives them real flexibility then in like reassembling it and playing with it in all these different variations. And they can do things that are really, look really simple, but you're like, why does that feel so fresh? Why
Yeah.
does that feel so new? Because they're bringing it together in new ways every single time, or you can go out and they can use almost like the same moves in two sets and it looks like a completely different set, because how they've blended those elements together, like they know how to take it in a new direction, basically.
Yeah.
And so I think that teaches you how to approach it, think about your dance very differently. And also this thing of what we're talking about of like, as you freestyle and improv, you start to understand what your own movement language is and what your own kind of body framework is like. And that when you integrate new movement, you have to like integrate it into the body of the language that you already have and understand how it sits with everything that you're already doing. Like it's not like, oh, I've learned that move, like, yep, it's good to go. Like
Yeah.
it's
No,
like actually
yeah.
understand like actually how does this new movement, how does this fit within like what I'm already doing it, and a bit like speaking a language, it's just like you use the phrases and then you use your new word and then it becomes a part of your fluency, and it's kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
part of
and
that.
maybe you think that that new movement is going to be like, oh, this is going to be like my star movement the next time,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the next time I freestyle, and then you start like using it and you start working with it, and you realize that, oh, this is actually just like an amazing transition. Like I still need to find like something else, like the final like
Yeah.
point at the end of a sentence.
That's so funny because there's some moves like I don't know how you feel like you can tell us like what these are for you in Vogue, but like for me, there's some moves that I'm like love is like a like you say like that full stop at the end of the sentence, and there's others those like statement moves, and there's others which for me only work as transitions. Like for me, that's like swipes and breakdancing. Swipes as a like full stop move, I find are so whack and uninteresting. But as like a transition move, they're so horrendously useful and they look fantastic when you put them with other things or use them to transition to other things. And I avoided them for so long because I was like, oh, they don't look that good. But once I started using them to transition between things, I was like, oh, this is actually a really useful and really dope movement when it's used in like that kind of syntax, like used almost like as like a kind of within the grammar of other movements.
Yeah, 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 totally. It's like doing like writing a poem or doing like Dada art,
Yeah, yeah.
It's like I am using language, but I'm just going to like twist
Yeah.
it and reverse it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I am using like yeah words but not in an order that you've ever seen them.
Yeah, I guess with Vogue, I mean, you can obviously do that, but because the Vogue beat is so specific,
Yeah,
it's always like ta-da-da, ta-da-da, ta-da, crash. It has a crash.
yeah,
So the crash is if you don't do a dip on a crash, you're out of beat. So that has to be the end of the sentence, you know? But then like, you might think it's a full stop, but actually it's just like, oh no, bitch, I'm just going down to the floor. You know, I haven't finished. You thought I was done, but I'm not. This is just a bit, you know? Just have a little taste of what I can do. So yeah. I guess it works, yeah. As long as you do it.
That's so much of like, and like playing with expectations as well. Like I always talk about this, like b-boying is like breakdancing is like, and like it's true as a lot of street dance. Those who are well versed in the culture will give you credit for looking like you're about to do something awesome and then not doing that thing.
Right.
Like, I'm like, because if you're like, I don't know, like breakdancing in front of like a crowd and you do like a big move, like let's say you do something that's like you do a backflip, like, you know, the lay person in the crowd who's like not first will be like, oh, that's amazing. And all the b-boys are standing there like, yeah, whatever. But if you like set up for a backflip and don't do a backflip, all the normal people are like, what the heck? And then all the b-boys are like, yeah, sick. You made us think you were going to do a backflip and then you didn't.
Absolutely. That happens like all the time.
A weird thing, but that's so much of it is just, especially when you're like versed in a dance and you see it a lot, like you do build up those expectations. And then when people flip those expectations by even not doing something, you're like, oh, sick.
yeah, totally. I love it. What you were saying earlier about, you know, how you can like milk a movement and see where it goes and stuff. I'm obsessed lately with mushrooms and mycelium and the world of fungi. I think it's fantastic. And I've also been reading like loads about queer theory because just because. And there is so much about that, like the way like mushrooms reproduce. It's so like, you know, just finding new paths. It's all about like creating new connections and creating paths, and like it's like that with freestyle, I believe, and you know, like not following this linear path, but more like finding the ways how to like get into the places you didn't think you could get, you know? And I think that also works quite well with like dancing or choreographing, and queer theory as well, because there is a bit of that, you know, a bit like, right, it's a spectrum. You can go in, out, up, down, you know, it's never linear. And I think like the possibilities of, thinking about like, you know, academic theories that are not based on linear thought, which I'm guessing is quite like, you know, 2020, 2021. But that I think really like feeds into freestyling or even like choreographing.
Yeah, it's like freedom of thought across like a myriad of different things, like within the dance and within like talking about gender as well, you know. And it's an exploratory approach to these things, and it's exploring these things through like a medium of play in a way. You know, it's taking a playful approach to these things. Like, I mean, think of it like, I think as well, like so much of our, you know, discussions like around gender and these things are like very serious. Like they've become very academicized and like very serious, I feel like, in to some degree in like recent years. And not to say that like that's wrong, but you know, I feel like it can be like become like a TED talk, and you know how amazing it is that like, you know, the ballroom community like it came up with like its own way to explore this thing that was kind of through this medium of kind of this playful medium and this like kind of culture where it was less about like, oh, and let's, you know, debate this rigorously, and it was much more about like, let's just see where this goes. You know?
More about like creating the culture than you know, analyzing it. Yeah, totally. I agree. It's really cool how it has grown so organically. You know, it started just, you know, as this like defense mechanism and like counter, you know, like a counter attack, I would say, to racism in like in drag pageants and things like that. And then it became like this monster of its own that is just like all over the world. And then, you know, there's
there's like a timeline for the ballroom community, and there the first, not the first, but one of the major breaking points is when YouTube is available. Because now, you know, you learn Vogue also from YouTube, and you see the balls, and you see like what people are doing and what they are bringing. So like the way it has changed since YouTube started is like it exploded exponentially, whereas it was just like, you know, growing like really slowly only in the States, and then it went like worldwide. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, the way in which like what are really underground subcultures like can suddenly like explode into the mainstream in like a really big way. Do you worry a little bit that it becomes separated from its roots and its grounding as a Black and Latinx LGBTQ kind of community?
That has definitely happened. I mean, you know, like even when they like quote unquote Vogue in RuPaul, it's very much like no. You know, and it has definitely become like very, very whitewashed and just like a commodity, you know.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Vogue classes, which is fine for the most part, is like good people teaching them, but that only means that certain people have access to them.
Right.
You know, it doesn't cater to the working class.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cater to people that are not necessarily comfortable in dance studios. And it's like catering to like straight, especially with Vogue, it's mainly like straight white women. I'm here in London, I mean, which is fine because, you know, as someone like, as female presenting person, I'm also like, well, I'm in a space where I can explore my sexuality and my sensuality without being objectified, because all of the gazes around me are queer gazes. So, you know, I'm not being put on a spot of like an object. So I understand the, you know, the appeal also.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think there is like a duty of care to the community to, you know, if you're teaching, what else are you doing for the community and for the people that don't have access to those classes and to those studios? And I think like, for the most part, it's been done. Like there's a lot of like very, you know, people very committed to like the political, I would say, and activist kind of side of it, which is great. But also, you know, sometimes it gets out of hand, and then, you know, because Vogue is so hot right now, like talent agencies are like, oh, looking for people to like Vogue in like a commercial or for, you know, like a pop artist or whatever, and they cast, you know, the people that are like more palatable, you know, the white skinny girls and the light skin queer boys, and you know, so there's still obviously like it's a process. I mean, and it's only natural that something as this amazing was going to like get to the mainstream and like forget about, you know, and not with its values. But then there's also things in the mainstream that are actually super accurate, like the show Pose, that is done by people in the community, with people in the community acting, with people of the community involved in the consulting of what it means and what it was like and the history, etc. So like, you know, shout out to Ryan Murphy.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know, yeah, that there's stuff out there as well, and resources that represent you well in the mainstream. And I guess a lot of it's just pointing people towards that stuff. And I mean, so much of it's just like just acknowledging it. It's like, yes. So it's yeah, like you say, it's like, it's not that those things are those bad or those people are bad. It's more just like, you know, you just acknowledging the culture, acknowledging where it comes from, and giving back, like you say, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so dope, man. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I don't know, kind of like jumping around here, but like I also didn't know that you spent time in like San Diego, California, in the States. Like, yeah, and you've had like, yeah, jumped around. Like, what's your experience of the arts and dance being like between like here versus like Mexico versus like San Diego? Are there things, what are kind of are there things that you take away from those places, that has like given you a little bit of a different attitude to your dancing?
I mean, in Mexico, it was all very like grassroots when I started dancing with Danzas Sin Fronteras. It was like an independent ballet company. This is like back in the day, right? So more than 15 years ago, I think. Or around 15 years ago. Sure.
Back when you were 10?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I was quite young. I was like 16 when I started dancing with them. And it was just so grassroots. Like we would stay after rehearsal to do the costumes ourselves and to, paint the backdrops for the theater ourselves. And it was amazing because it was a very small company. We were like 15 people. And I was an apprentice. So I was like, and I was really, really young. I just had no idea what was going on. But it was so great because it was the first time that I had like an actual, like, chosen family. We spent from 8 in the morning to 8 p.m. every day together. We ate together. We like, it was like, everything was like so familiar, and it had like a very nice, like hierarchical structure where, me and the apprentices were always also 16. We were kind of like in the safe side, just like, like giggling on the side kind of thing. And it was just very, very beautiful. And I think at that time, like I took that for granted,
Right.
Because then when I went to Mexico, I was in the City Ballet of San Diego that didn't exist. And I was like, oh, like, hold on a second. I thought that this is what I was coming for. And this is what we were doing, just like creating this like amazing family. And no, it was very much like a job for everybody. I didn't have like many friends, even though we did all these classes and rehearsals and shows together. And it was actually quite hard for me. I actually stopped doing like ballet professionally after that experience. I was really young still. I was like 18, 19, 20. And I was like there on my own. And my mom was like coming and going, but it was a very difficult experience. Like I didn't know how to like communicate with people. I could tell that there was like, I mean, I'm sure things have changed, but there was like racism, and it was like, why are the Mexicans always at the back kind of thing. Because San Diego is like a border city with Mexico, so I was literally like 25 minutes away from my country. Not my city, but my country, which makes it a great place for Mexican food. But I think I got a bit like, oh, this is not what I believed that, the dance world was. Like ballet was all I knew, and it's what I wanted to do, I wanted to do ballet. I didn't want to just jump into like contemporary or like find a different style. Like I was there for ballet and like had been since I was like 10, so it was kind of very like eye-opening for me at that time. But it was also very beautiful because it made me realize that, I could have friends apart from dancing and could have like great friends. And I ended up making fantastic people that, made me very, very humble and very kind of like open my eyes to very different experiences, in very different like paths of life of why were people in the States. A lot of like, most of my friends were immigrants, and like, just the different struggles that life brought. And I was like, oh wow, this is amazing that I have the opportunity to like get a glance of all these lives that are so different than mine. So that was great. So I definitely take humility as something that I learned there, and I will never take that for granted again. And here in London, when I came to London, I was, a bit older. I came here when I was like, 28 or something. So I think I already like had an idea about like wanting to leave and wanting to see like more of the world, and like I had done it before, blah, blah, blah. But like dancing in London really made me, first of all, realize how cool dancing was. Because people in London that dance are very cool. Um, but also kind of to find my individuality, from a classical background, you try to be a bit like homogeneous, is that how you say it? Like, be everybody being equal and everybody looking the same, everybody having the same clothes and everybody having the same bun and all of those things. And then London like really taught me about like individuality and how my movement, it's not that it was wrong, because I always in my journey as a dancer get very insecure about my moving, the way I move, right? My movement, and be like, oh, it's not good enough. It's not trained enough. Maybe it's too trained. Maybe, and and London really made me like realize that like the way you move is the way that works for you, and it's what makes you amazing as a mover.
Isn't it crazy? Like the being too trained. It's like you work so hard, and then you're like, oh no,
I know.
Have I worked too hard? Have I like put myself into like a category I can't get out of? And it's like
absolutely,
yeah.
But then it's also nice when people tell you like, wow, you can really point your toes, and you're like, yeah, I know, it looks like a shrimp. I worked hard for that shrimp.
I love that. Yeah, I love shrimp.
So yeah, definitely has been a journey to like kind of like finding myself as well. And I'm so impressed because I feel now with like social media and like now that I teach children and like loads of teenagers as well, I feel like they're so young, but also they really know who they are. And I'm always like, if I knew who I was at your age, it's amazing. Like, took me, 2 continents and like 3 countries to be like, oh, this is who I am. In the dance world, and obviously as a person that it's not only about in the dance world, I guess. But yeah, I feel like young people now, it's like, I guess social media has a lot to do with it, but they're very aware of the world now, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah, like it's opened up a lot of, given people access to some online communities or becoming aware of communities that they might fit into that they might not have access to if you're, just from like a small town, haven't made it out. And yeah, for a lot of people, it's given them access to, oh hey, there's like other people out there who are interested in the same stuff I'm into, or and acknowledging like the process as well. It's the the ways in which our identities like flux and like change, but also they adapt for like what we're going through, and what to some degree like we're the person like we need to be for now, and it's that process of like always arriving, isn't it? It's never like, oh, I'm finally exactly who I'm meant to be. And it's like, well, maybe I'm who I need to be for now, and who I was then was who I needed to be for like that time,
time. Yeah, like that is something that I always like want to put into my dancing, is just like fluidity, and how like life is fluid and identity is fluid and the way we dance is fluid, and just like it's very important for like accepting, and that of like who you are. And yeah, I really like what you said. It's like, I am where I need to be for now, and then it's just a matter, I guess, of like being proud and being kind of like understanding of who you were then and how important it was for for that ongoing process.
Wow. Tell us what kind of projects have you got going on as we emerge from lockdown and we're coming to new things. What's happening in the world of Mariana that people can look forward to?
So I am full on with my dance school, which is called Ballet North. We're starting some adult classes soon. I've been teaching this online ballet class called Queer Ballet every Monday. It has stopped for the moment, but it will resume in a few weeks. And that is actually something that online has worked great, because this is a lot of people that would not feel comfortable in a dance studio doing ballet, which is a bit demanding on bodies. So it works great online. So
are there things that you do differently as a part of that, or is it just about having a queer specific space?
I mean, it is a queer specific space. I guess I do all of the exercises because it's a beginner's class. So I mark it and I show the exercise and then I do it. So I don't have that much time to do corrections. No one has broken a leg so far, so I think I'm doing fine. What I also do is touch wood. I do improv. So I kind of like teach like kind of like the feeling and the quality of ballet, of being like floaty and being delicate and all of these things. And then we do like an improv where everybody just kind of like dance around in their living room. I do this exercise called point at things. So it's like, look over there, look over there, look over here.
I love that.
Soft.
That's dope.
It's fantastic.
that's such a good way to just like start with that kind of that voguey feel like, or whatever of like right? I never even thought about that, the directionality of it. It was just like, oh yeah, be like there
like, just these... like point at places and you know just do it soft. Ballet there
as you're just walking down the street, just be like, just look at that,
exactly. Oh my goodness, oh this way.
I love that. That's dope.
I have that throughout lockdown. Can you hold on a second so I can make my cat shush? Can we?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, I'm back. You know how cats don't like closed doors, so I had to open the door. Sorry. So I'm doing queer ballet. I've been also developing a project throughout lockdown. This is since the first lockdown. Me and my mate Cole, shout out to Cole. We've been doing this project called The In-Between. So they're a writer, and we were just feeling a bit trapped and not creative. So we started doing choosing a word a day, and they did like a couple of paragraphs about that word, and I did like a minute or two of like moving, like kind of like physicalizing that word. And it was great. And now it's all on Instagram. We did 90 days, and 90 days are up on Instagram. I think less than 90. We're still uploading, but it has been really, really great because it gave me a chance to do what we were talking about, to like not be technical and just kind of like fall into movement and just I wanted to feel something, So that has been great. That is on Instagram. It's called The In-Between. I can give you the proper handle afterwards. And now that we are out of lockdown, I just hope to start some things here and there. Just trying to bring the community together again. The queer community, and mainly the queer community, because that's the community I like. Just trying to start some things, but I always like to keep my projects, or so far the way I've done it is that they are quite organic and they are quite grassroots, and I feel that there's a lot of power in that, so I think that's still the way it's going to be. No dates for anything just yet, but things will pop.
I like that thought or approach as well of like just co-creating something, or just having these parallel creative processes, writer and dancer, just creating in a space together, and then just seeing how those things kind of interact. Is just fantastic, and just being committed to a creative process daily, like a sketchbook, and then like he's saying, just not being committed to outcome, just creating and then seeing what kind of comes of that, really.
Yeah, totally. And it was also creative in many ways, because this was lockdown number 1 where we couldn't go out. And, even though we could go for like one walk, I was not going to do a video outside. Like, that is so irresponsible, So I had to find ways to put the camera in this tiny little space in like all of the possible angles. So it looked like I was somewhere new. So, so some of the videos I'm just like, this is just my finger moving, because like, that's all you're going to see today, and I think this probably happened to all of or to all performers, just like, okay, what am I going to wear in this video? Like, these people have seen all of my wardrobe by now, and that was also very interesting.
When you're like, here's the MTV Cribs like tour of my house, and you're like, well, here it is.
Yeah, it's online.
All right, goodbye. Yeah.
You think you know, but you have no idea.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the real. That wasn't MTV Cribs, but something like that.
Some other sassy MTV show.
Yeah, one of those from the 90s.
Yeah.
No, but definitely, I think like as performers, we were really put like on the spot with creativity, not only with our bodies and with what we want to say, but also how are we presenting it now? I bought a tripod, I bought a light, I bought like, I look at a spoon during lockdown number 1 and I was like, this is perfect for today's video, which word, like the word is, the sky. And I'm like, this spoon will be the principal element in my next video about the sky. So that was great.
I love it. It's just, those creative restrictions of like just creating in your own home are really helpful sometimes to just pushing you to create something new and just break out of like your normal kind of creative boundaries, and it's not about it being even like right or it being good. It's just about like, oh, hey, this is new. It's kind of more about that. This has been such a dope podcast. It's been so great having you on. We'll drop all the links to the stuff you're talking about. So audience, give Mariana a follow. If you're interested in her classes, you can check those out. We'll pop some information below for those. Mariana, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing.
Thanks. And if you enjoyed the podcast, hit like and subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you next week.